So over the weekend was the White House Correspondents' Dinner. That's when a bunch of Washington reporters, print reporters, and broadcast reporters gathered together at the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. And they usually hire a comedian, and the comedian roasts some of the journalists. Typically, the president goes, and the comedian roasts the president. This year was a little bit different because Donald Trump, this is the first time as a sitting president that he went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And it's the first year that they used some type of a mentalist, some type of psychic type of person to come who was going to entertain the crowd instead of using a comedian. Anyway, so Donald Trump was there and somebody tried to run in with guns. A person ran in with a handgun, armed with a handgun, a shotgun, and several knives. And it should be important to note right here that these are all guns that aren't pushed by gun control advocates to try to ban. Handguns, they're very common. A lot of people have them. They use them for personal protection, both on the left and the right, because they're practical. You can conceal them. You can put them in your car. You can carry them in your pocket, in your purse. There have been very few open attempts to ban handguns. This person was carrying a handgun. So gun control efforts would not help stop this person carrying a handgun. The other gun he was carrying was a shotgun. Now, a shotgun is not a quote unquote assault weapon. A shotgun is a long gun, often used for hunting. It can shoot slugs or pellets, which are like BBs, and it shoots them in a blast, a pattern. And so this person was armed with a shotgun. Again, there haven't been very many open attempts in the United States to ban shotguns. So there was not an assault weapon, quote unquote assault weapon. It was a handgun and shotgun and knives. So around this discussion of the alleged attempted assassin of Donald Trump over the weekend, you can disregard the gun control arguments because gun control advocates will not admit to wanting to ban handguns and shotguns. So anyway, let's take a look at what happened as it unfolded. So I don't know if you could hear that, but there were some bangs, and it took a while for everybody to realize what was going on. The Secret Service rushed up on stage. After several seconds, they rushed Donald Trump off of the stage. So who did this? Nobody was killed. This person rushed in and ran past the magnetometers in the hotel lobby, and eventually this person got off a shot a Secret Service agent in his vest or her vest. Reportedly, this Secret Service agent had a phone inside the vest in the pocket, and that helped stop the round that this Secret Service agent was shot with. And fortunately, the Secret Service agent survived with minor injuries. The suspect was detained. That person's name is Cole Thomas Allen. So who is Cole Thomas Allen? Cole Thomas Allen is he is from California, and he's from Torrance, California. He's a part-time instructor at a place called C2, a test prep company. He has a 2017 bachelor degree from California Institute of Technology and Mechanical Engineering, and a 2025 master's degree from Cal State University in computer science. This person donated $25 to the Kamala Harris campaign in 2024. He has social media posts that consist of anti-Christian rhetoric and anti-Trump rhetoric. Some of his writings were discovered, and we'll talk about his quote unquote "stupid manifesto" that he wrote. And so here is a clip from CNN telling us who this person is.
CNN's Brian Todd has more on the suspect and what we've learned this morning about the Secret Service agent who was shot during the attack.
We have new information just in from the U.S. Secret Service regarding the Secret Service officer who was shot in the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Anthony Guglielmi, the chief of communications for the Secret Service, telling CNN that the officer in question has been released from the hospital and, quote, the ballistic vest helped us avoid a potential tragedy. That is according to Anthony Guglielmi, chief of communications for the U.S. Secret Service. That officer released from the hospital. Anthony Guglielmi declining to name the officer or the hospital where he was treated, but the officer has been released, according to the Secret Service. Some other information we're getting, according to sources who spoke to CNN, the suspect is identified as Cole Thomas Allen, 31 years old, from Torrance, California. Now, according to the interim Washington Metropolitan D.C. Police Chief Jeffrey Carroll, he said that the suspect was armed with a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives in this exchange. Chief Carroll saying that the suspect and law enforcement officers did exchange gunfire, and the chief saying that they believe that the suspect may have been a guest at the Washington Hilton Hotel, the same hotel where this incident occurred. The chief saying that they secured a room there and are trying to determine the contents of that room, so that will provide some critical information. Now, according to the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, the suspect faces 2 charges at least. One of them is using a firearm during a crime of violence. The other is assault on a federal officer using a dangerous weapon. And some quick information on this alleged suspect's background. According to public records that CNN was able to sift through, he worked as a teacher and a video game developer. According to a LinkedIn profile matching his name and photograph, it described him as a part-time teacher at C2 Education. That is a test prep and tutoring company. CNN has reached out to C2 for comment. We have not heard back from them. C2, according to its records, did name Allen as the company's, quote, Teacher of the Month in December of 2024. According to a LinkedIn profile, Allen graduated from the California Institute of Technology in 2017 with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. He received a master's degree in computer science from Cal State University at Dominguez Hills last year in 2025. According to Federal Election Commission records, he donated $25 to Kamala Harris's presidential campaign in 2024. And he described himself in his LinkedIn profile as a video game developer. He appears to have published at least one game, an indie game called Boredom, for sale on the Steam gaming platform.
All right, so that's enough of that. So that's who this person is, the suspect. So the charges that he's facing, at least preliminarily, according to the United States Attorney for Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, who used to be on Fox News, he is facing a charge for using, carrying, possessing a firearm during a crime of violence. That is 18 U.S.C. Section 924C. That offense carries up to life imprisonment, and it carries a minimum sentence. Depending on the circumstances, it's 5 years, 7 years if a weapon is brandished, 10 years if a weapon is discharged. So this person is facing a 10-year minimum of a life sentence, up to life, for using, carrying, possessing a firearm during a crime of violence. According to the United States Attorney, he is likely to also be charged with assault on a federal officer using a dangerous weapon. And that's a 20-year offense. So this person is looking at very, very serious time. It's the third attempt on Donald Trump's life in 3 years. And the reactions have been interesting. We hear about how people want the political discourse in this country to be more civil, to be more pleasant. And some people blame Donald Trump for ruining that discourse. Donald Trump uses coarse language, oftentimes childish language. He says that if you hit him back, he'll hit you back twice as hard. He's a counter puncher. That's what he says. But clearly something is wrong. Something is wrong when people attempt to use violence in order to solve their disputes, especially in politics. We're in a very dangerous place in this country. I hear some interesting things about what happened. I've heard people say, well, this was a staged incident. I've heard that from very otherwise very smart people. But if that's true, then I have questions, because if this was quote unquote staged, then whoever put this conspiracy together would have to have what's called a patsy. A patsy is a fall guy, a fall person, because the Secret Service and the police captured the shooter as he came into the building, as he ran past security. So they have somebody in custody, and this person is going to be charged. Is that person a part of the conspiracy? Is that person a part of the staging of what could be an assassination attempt? Because that person is probably going to prison for a long time. So how do you stage that part of it? I don't know. So if you hear somebody saying this was staged, ask them that. And they say it was staged to distract from the Epstein issue. It was staged to distract from the Iran war. It was staged because Donald Trump didn't want to go on stage to be roasted by whoever's speaking on the microphone, whether it's somebody from the press or this mentalist or whoever he is who was going to be up there doing tricks or whatever he does. Again, I would ask those who believe that it was staged, you have some questions that you need to answer. If you're going to posit a theory like that, then just be able to support that theory with some facts. That makes sense. But in my mind, you have to explain the person that was captured and what's going to happen to that person as far as the conspiracy is concerned. It seems elaborate. It seems unlikely. So that happened over the weekend, and I had to change how we were going to do this podcast to talk about that. But moving on Friday or last week, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a civil rights organization that keeps a check, it says, on hate and supremacist groups, was indicted by the United States government. So who is the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center? The SPLC says, quote, "Your support powers our work to confront hate, stand up to injustice, and defend our civil and human rights. From the courtroom to the classroom to communities across the country, you can help create a more just nation." So that's who the SPLC says they are. Let's take a look at some more of what they say.
We're still excluded from good jobs, adequate housing, quality education, and other opportunities. And they had little recourse to demand justice. Our co-founders, Joe Levin and Morris Dees, sought to change that. In 1971, they formally incorporated the Southern Poverty Law Center and named civil rights leader Julian Bond as president. In the decades that followed, we took on cases that few others at the time were willing to pursue. Cases that tested civil rights laws, held powerful institutions accountable, and challenged and even bankrupted the most hateful organizations in the nation. SPLC also launched programs to prevent hate from taking root in the first place. Today, that legacy of fighting for racial equity and civil rights in the Deep South is more important than at any time in modern history. Extremists are growing bolder and have pushed white supremacist ideology back into the mainstream. Long cases that tested civil rights laws, held powerful institutions accountable, and challenged and even bankrupted the most hateful organizations in the nation. SPLC also launched programs to prevent hate from racial discrimination and violence cast long shadows in the South. Black, brown, Asian, and indigenous people and others historically pushed to the margins were still excluded from good jobs, adequate housing, quality education, and other opportunities. And they had little recourse to demand justice. Our co-founders, Joe Levin and Morris Dees, sought to change that. In 1971, they formally incorporated the Southern Poverty Law Center and named civil rights leader Julian Bond as president. In the decades that followed, we took on cases that few others at the time were willing to pursue. Cases that tested civil rights laws, held powerful institutions accountable, and challenged and even bankrupted the most hateful organizations in the nation. SPLC also launched programs to prevent hate from taking root in the first place. Today, that legacy of fighting for racial equity and civil rights in the Deep South is more important than at any time in modern history. Extremists are growing bolder and have pushed white supremacist ideology back into the mainstream.
So that's impressive, right? You would see that video and says, this organization is an organization that I can get behind. They're fighting against hate. They're fighting against white supremacy. They're fighting against bigotry. They've been in the fight for almost 50 years. I don't donate money to this organization, one might say. Well, then last week, the United States indicted the SPLC. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why would you indict this nonprofit organization that fights hate, white supremacy, and bigotry? Let's see what the federal authorities have to say about that.
Today, a few minutes ago, in the Middle District of Alabama, a grand jury returned an 11-count indictment charging the Southern Poverty Law Center with 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. According to the charges in the indictment, the SPLC is a nonprofit entity that purports to fight white supremacy and racial hatred by reporting on extremist groups and conducting research to inform law enforcement groups with the goal of dismantling these groups. As the indictment describes, the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred. The indictment describes this conduct in detail, but one troubling example is that the SPLC was paying a member of the leadership group that planned the Unite the Right protest in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017 that resulted in the death of 1 person and injured dozens more. This particular person being paid by the SPLC allegedly received approximately $270,000 over the course of 8 years. In total, according to the indictment, between 2014 and 2023, SPLC paid at least $3 million to 8 individuals at least. These individuals were affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan, United Klans of America, National Socialist Movement, Aryan Nations affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, the Nationalist Socialist Party of America, Nazis, and the American Front. Now, as the indictment lays out, after SPLC paid members of these extremist groups, it created work product that reported on these activities that the members participated in or contributed to. And to that end, it was doing the exact opposite of what it's told its donors it was doing. Not dismantling extremism, but funding it. To carry out this scheme, SPLC created bank accounts in the name of at least 5 completely fictitious organizations that had no bona fide employees or legitimate business purpose. The money was passed from SPLC to one sham account to a second sham account and then loaded onto prepaid cards to give to the members of the extremist groups. This was designed to shield the source of those funds, and because of this, SPLC is also charged with 1 count, as I said earlier, of conspiracy to commit money laundering. In conclusion, I want to thank the acting U.S. Attorney in the Middle District of Alabama, Kevin.
All right, so that's enough of that. So the indictment, as indicated by the acting attorney general, there are several charges against the SPLC. And those charges are count 1 through 6, wire fraud. And then you have counts 7 through 10, false statements to a federally insured bank. Count 11, conspiracy to commit concealment otherwise known as money laundering. So, as indicated in the press conference, the SPLC would pay people who belong to the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazi Party in exchange, supposedly, for information. Those are the allegations. But these same people who were paid were actually active participants in these organizations. So they were furthering the payees who received more than $3 million were acting in furtherance of the Nazi Party. They were paid a lot of money while acting in furtherance of the Ku Klux Klan. Perhaps they provided information that was useful to the stated purpose of the Southern Poverty Law Center. But why would you pay them $3 million to report on their activities? And if their activities are nefarious and harmful, isn't that available for all to see? Why would you pay somebody to tell you that Nazis are bad? Why would you need to pay someone to tell you that the Ku Klux Klan is bad? And why would you risk paying that large sum of money to people who may use that money to further the aims and objectives of the organizations that you say that you're against? So, the specifics from the indictment: they paid a member of the online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I'm sure you've heard about that, because that's where, I believe it was a young lady who was killed during that protest, that march. And also, it's the reason, the aftermath of that was the reason why Joe Biden said he ran for president, a campaign that he won.
I ran for president in 2020 because of what I saw in Charlottesville in August of 2017. Extremists coming out of the woods, carrying torches, their veins bulging from their necks, carrying Nazi swastikas.
So Joe Biden ran for president because of what he saw during the 2017 Charlottesville, Virginia Unite the Right rally, a rally that was supported in part, allegedly, by money paid for by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which says that it is an organization that exists to fight white supremacy and bigotry. In essence, allegedly, the SPLC sponsored, or was one of the sponsors of that rally. That's in the indictment. Another quote unquote informant was affiliated with the neo-Nazi organization, the National Alliance, and served as an operative for the Southern Poverty Law Center for more than 20 years. Between 2014 and 2023, the SPLC secretly paid this informant more than $1 million, according to the indictment. Another person that the SPLC allegedly paid was an imperial wizard of the United Clans of America. And interestingly, the United Clans of America was the same organization that bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. The SPLC used this money raised from donors to pay an imperial wizard of the United Clans of America, the same organization that blew up and killed those little girls. Why? So they can tell us that this is a bad organization. We've known that for 60 years. 60 years. There are others. There's many instances here in the indictment of similar conduct by the SPLC. They paid a member of the Ku Klux Klan, this person was married to an exalted cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan. What? They paid the national president, allegedly, of American Front, a convicted federal felon, for his participation in a cross burning. That's why he was convicted. Between 2016 and 2019, the SPLC paid this person more than $19,000. Why? Why? This was clearly a bad person, a convicted felon, a person who burned a cross. I mean, the ultimate symbol of white supremacy in this country, other than a black person swinging from a rope from the branch of a tree. And the SPLC paid this person, allegedly. So that's the indictment. So the SPLC has an explanation for what it did. And it should be noted also that there are many people who still support the SPLC in light of these allegations. But I will play you SPLC's response to these things. But let's read what Hakeem Jeffries had to say. He says, this so-called indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center is announced by Todd Blanche and Cash Patel is baseless and illegitimate. These partisan hacks who continue to weaponize the criminal justice system against perceived opponents will never intimidate us. And all of them will be held accountable for their corrupt behavior, no matter what it takes. I don't know if the SPLC committed a crime, and neither do you. But what I do know is shocking that the SPLC spent more than $3 million paying known racists, bigots, white supremacists. That's shocking. And I think that is something that most people didn't know. And it's information that could be useful for people who might want to donate money to the SPLC. Right now, a lot of organizations and politicians are still supporting the SPLC. So what's SPLC's response?
By this administration, they have made no secret of who they want to protect and who they want to destroy. For example, in October, FBI Director Cash Patel announced the Bureau would sever its ties with the SPLC. And in December, House Republicans held a hearing to accuse us of being partisan and profitable. The latest threat is the most serious: a criminal investigation and possible charges against the SPLC or some of our employees. Although we don't know all the details, the focus appears to be on the SPLC's prior use of paid confidential informants to gather credible intelligence on extremely violent groups. This use of informants was necessary because we are no stranger to threats of violence. In 1983, our offices were firebombed, and in the years since, there have been countless credible threats against our staff.
Let me stop him there. So it appears that he's saying, the SPLC is saying that paying known Nazis and Klan members was necessary to protect the SPLC. Sounds like that's what he's saying. Why is that? Why is that? Why not get law enforcement involved? And during the time that the SPLC allegedly paid many of these people, Barack Obama was president or Joe Biden was president. So it can't claim that it had an unfriendly administration to deal with if it's positioned that Donald Trump or George W. Bush were somehow not responsive to allegations of violence against or threats of violence against the SPLC. Why during the Obama administration was the SPLC paying Nazis and paying white supremacists? Why during the Biden administration was the SPLC still paying Nazis and white supremacists? And why did it stop? Because it stopped this practice before this indictment. If it saw nothing wrong with doing it, why aren't they still doing it?
For decades, we engaged in unprecedented litigation to dismantle the Klan and other hate groups. In light of that work, we sought to protect the safety of our staff and the public. We frequently shared what we learned from informants with local and federal law enforcement, including the FBI. We did not, however, share our use of informants broadly with anyone to protect the identity and safety of the informants and their families. And while we no longer work with paid informants, we continue to take their safety seriously.
All right. So although the SPLC shared some of his information with law enforcement. It did not share the names of the people, of the informants. These were people who, according to the indictment, were actively involved in promoting the aims of the organization, such as Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. The person that they paid was active in promoting that activity. And the SPLC helped protect the identity of that person. Not only did they pay the person, they protected the person from law enforcement by not disclosing the name.
These individuals risked their lives to infiltrate and inform on the activities of our nation's most radical and violent extremist groups. When we began working with informants, we were living in the shadow of the height of the civil rights movement, which had seen bombings at churches, state-sponsored violence against
Shadow of the height of the civil rights movement. How is, during the Obama administration from 2009 to 2017, that's the shadow of the height of the civil rights movement. Let's say the height of the civil rights movement was 1968 when Martin Luther King was killed, or just prior to that. That's the height. So the shadow of the height of the civil rights movement, when they were paying informants all the way into the 2020s, that's the shadow of the height of the civil rights movement? I don't think so.
Demonstrators and the murders of activists that went unanswered by the justice system. There is no question that what we learned from informants saved lives. Today, the federal government has been weaponized to dismantle the rights of our nation's most vulnerable people, and any organization like ours that tries to stand in the breach. We stood in the vanguard then, and we stand in the vanguard today. We will not be intimidated into silence or contrition, and we will not abandon our mission or the communities we serve. This moment in history finds Americans in a critical struggle between those who continue to pull and bend the arc of history toward justice and those who resist progress. We will vigorously defend ourselves, our staff, and our work. We will continue to fight hate, and we will continue to seek a safer and more just world. We trust that the many people and organizations who share our commitment to defending civil society will stand with us as together we fight injustice. Thank you.
You know, periodically there are instances where a person might be a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter, and who's caught and arrested setting fires because they would set the fires and then respond to the alarm about the fire so they can appear to be heroes. I don't know if that's applicable to this situation, but what do you think? Let's look at the fundraising for the SPLC after the Charlottesville event. So Charlottesville was in 2017, the Unite the Right rally. The year before that, SPLC had $51 million in funding. After the Unite the Right rally that the SPLC allegedly helped promote and fund, the SPLC saying they stood in the breach to fight white supremacy. And they held up the Charlottesville, Virginia rally as an example of why the SPLC is necessary and why it exists. Now, they didn't at that time tell people that the money that they paid to organizers or an organizer of the Unite the Right rally, allegedly. So in the year after the that rally, the SPLC raised $133 million, a difference of $80 million after that incident. Is that the volunteer firefighter lighting the flame? I don't know. But if you ask yourself why this quote unquote civil rights organization would pay Nazis and white supremacists, these incidents certainly have paid off, such as Charlottesville paid off for the SPLC. Now, thinking their tactics to be stupid, to be unreasonable, to be unnecessary, doesn't make you an ally of white supremacists. It doesn't make you an ally of the KKK. It doesn't make you an ally of the Nazis to say the SPLC, you shouldn't pay white supremacists and Nazis. It might mean you have common sense. Everything is not a left or right issue. You can hate the KKK and you can hate the Nazi movement and not embrace the SPLC, what it's allegedly done in this situation. You cannot like what the SPLC has allegedly done and still not embrace Donald Trump. If that's not your favorite politician, that's fine. You can be anti-SPLC and anti-Donald Trump. You can be a great Democrat and anti-SPLC. You don't have to buy the whole package. Okay. So anyway, that's what happened with the SPLC. Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of On Retainer with Thomas Randolph. I'll see you next time. Bye.